Well, good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Love Not Fear. Annie's away this week and I also am away. I'm on a house sitting gig, a pet sitting gig, and I've got two gorgeous little doggies here and three cats who may well decide that they want to be part of the show before we finish. So if they do, they do. So what am I going to talk about today? Being here on my own. Well, I thought I'd answer a question that some of you have been asking. Am I a globalist or a nationalist? And as usual, I've made a few notes. But I mean, my first response to that question is, hey, there you go with the labels again. I don't like labels, especially labels that are so often used to divide people. The inference being that you have to be either one or the other. And if you're the other, well, then you're them. You're not us. Yeah. Nevertheless, I shall attempt to answer the question as best I can and to look at some of the issues that arise out of that question. Critics of nationalism like to point out that the Nazis call themselves the National Socialist Party, picking up on the nationalist bit while doing their best to underplay the socialist bit. So let's look very briefly at the model of politics that we were all taught in school and university. You know, the straight line with communism on the left and fascism on the right. It's not really fit for purpose, is it? You think about it. Socialism, communism, or its less extreme form of socialism, and fascism, they're not opposites. They're just two different faces of totalitarianism, two different ways of oppressing people, two different ways of keeping people down, two different boots stamping on the human face forever, as Orwell put it. I believe that model of politics was actually invented to disguise the fact that communism and fascism are cousins. And I've often proposed, I've proposed it before in shows I've done on this channel, and I proposed it in my book, Love Not Fear, and I've proposed it on my website, lovenotfear.uk, that model of politics is not fit for purpose. And a better one, if you must have a straight line at all, would have communism and fascism on the far left. So what are we going to put on the right? What's going to be the right of politics? Well, if we've got authoritarianism, totalitarianism on the left, then why don't we put freedom on the right? Freedom as represented by anarchy, in the true sense of what that word really, really means. Total freedom, anarchy, the idea that people can live and societies can function without any top-down laws or authoritarianism of any sort. That really would be freedom, wouldn't it? Of course, we still need to have some kind of democratic way of making joint decisions. Decisions that affect groups of people need to be made democratically by the members of that group. But such an organization, we wouldn't even call it a government. We'd probably call it a coordinating function or something, with no powers, no teeth, just the ability to talk to people and suggest. It certainly wouldn't need to be called a government. In my book, I talk about such a utopia. And I talk about ways that we could help to bring it about. In my book, I talk about 10 pillars of utopia. And the top pillar, the number one, is an expression that I've nicked off of the Bill and Ted films: be excellent to each other. And the other 9 principles are just different ways that we can be excellent to each other, peer to peer. And I'm sure there were more than just 9. I'm sure there are lots of different ways we can find to be excellent to each other. By doing things for one another, by performing all the tasks that the government normally perform for us, for one another, peer to peer, without any money changing hands. And that would make the old top-down system completely obsolete. And I don't think we can beat the old system. I think we have to make it obsolete. It's going to be a quick check to see if anybody wants to come on. No, there's nobody in the waiting room. I didn't actually announce this show tonight because I wasn't sure when I was going to be able to do it. I'm travelling back to Stafford tomorrow, so it's all a bit of a rush. Of course, we can't do all that globally just yet. If we tried to do that globally, then the kind-hearted people in the world would just be trodden all over, and the rogues would rule the day, as indeed they do now. But we can set up small groups of like-minded people. And I've already set up such a group online. It's called Let's Help Each Other to Thrive.org. Let's Help Each Other to Thrive.org. Feel free to have a look at the website and to sign up on the website if you'd like to join us. It's a no money changes hands group where we do things for each other on a don't pay me back, pay it forward basis. What goes around comes around. So nationalism or globalism. Let's take a look at nationalism for a minute. I've written about this before many times. And I did a show on here about a year ago, might have been 2 years ago now, called Borders, Love Them or Hate Them. So feel free to look it up. It's on this channel. I discuss why, at least temporarily, or for the foreseeable future, probably, we're going to need national borders. Now, at this point, I always get criticized by anarchists who call me a statist, which I'm not really. I don't like these labels anyway. But at my soul, I'm an anarchist too. I'm a rebel. I don't want anyone telling me what I can and can't do. And the last 2 or 3 years, I've really had a chance to prove that and live by that principle. Totally ignoring everything that the government have told me to do, doing the opposite. But I'm a pragmatic anarchist. I realize that we can't just scrap borders and governments overnight, much as I would like to do so. People who like borders, they say, people who don't like borders, the globalists, they say, well, you can't see the borders from space. I say, no, I can't see your garden fence from space either, but it doesn't mean I'm going to sit on your lawn and have a picnic. You know, all species, most species have some form of territory. A place where you can decide what happens there, and nobody can tell you otherwise. So what purpose do national borders actually serve? Well, let me say that for a start, I'd like them to be porous. I'd like there to be free movement of people and goods across borders. We shouldn't need passports to cross a border. Borders shouldn't be to keep people in or keep people out. They should just be administrative areas which enables the administration of that area, of that country, if you like. I know some of you don't like the word country or nation, so let's just say place, that enable the administration of that place to make laws and regulations that suit the customs and the traditions of the people who live in that place. Laws and regulations that are compatible with the culture of the people who live in that place. People who live within those borders. There's been a lot of talk recently, well, not just recently, there's been a lot of talk about diversity. And I wrote a piece recently where I said that I love diversity. I think we need diversity. We need the diversity of lots and lots of different countries or different places, if you prefer, each with their own diverse cultures and traditions. But that the fake diversity that the globalists are trying to sell us now isn't diversity at all. It's the opposite of that. They're trying to homogenize the world. And yeah, ultimately, I'd like to see devolution come in to break up the nations of the world into smaller units. At the moment, and I mean, this varies year to year, but at the moment, I'm going to talk about figures here. We have approximately 200 different countries, different nation states in the world. As I say, it varies a little bit from year to year. And I'd like to see those cut in half, so we have 400 different countries. And then I'd like to see those split in half, so we have 800 different countries. Until eventually we have 8.5 billion different countries. In other words, one for each person. That's the way to get rid of borders. That's the way to get rid of nations. If you don't like nation states, that's the way to get rid of them, make them smaller and smaller and smaller progressively until they disappear. But don't just wipe away national borders overnight, because that would just leave a vacuum that would be immediately occupied by a totalitarian world government, and we don't want that. And there are ways that we can make our governments more accountable. If you take a look at my website, lovenotfear.uk, you'll see that I talk about, there's an article on there called We Have the Technology, We Can Rebuild Our Democracy. And in it, I suggest that we have, and I'm basing this on the UK model of Parliament, but it would work just as well for Congress in America or for the administrative system in any other country. But I'm using a UK-based terminology. So members of Parliament. Say you have a member of Parliament or a member of Congress or anything else. At the moment, a member of Parliament represents approximately 100,000 people. Constituency sizes vary around the country, but approximately 100,000 people. Under the system I propose, we'd have some kind of chip and pin card, like your bank card, where you could vote. Every time there's a vote in the House of Commons, you could vote in it if you wanted to, only if you wanted to. You wouldn't be coerced to in any way. If you want to watch the debate and then vote on it, you would be allowed to do so using your chip and pin card. And there are millions of chip and pin transactions that happen every day in banking, perfectly safely. So I'm sure the technology would work perfectly well for our democracy. The way it would work is the MP, your MP, would have 100,000 votes instead of one. He'd have 100,000 votes, or the actual number of people in his constituency, less the number of people who actually chose to vote in that debate. And the software to do that is very, very simple. I mean, I could write it myself in 5 minutes. Most 10-year-olds could write it. Some people have suggested that, I mean, I wrote that article quite a few years ago. Some people have suggested to me now that the blockchain would actually be a better technology to use. And I did a show with a guy who proposed that on this channel about a year ago. So feel free to look that up if you're interested. But whatever technology we use to bring it about, we can find a way to enable every single one of us to vote in any debate in the House of Commons that we are interested in. We don't have to delegate the vote to our delegates, our members of Parliament, unless we choose to do so. I also talk about the idea that we shouldn't vote for members of Parliament who are also members of political parties. We should vote for independent candidates who are from the town, who will come to town meetings and take their instructions from us as to how they wish us, as to how we wish them to vote. We've had far too many years now of politicians telling us what to do. It's time we turned it around. So let's have a look at something else. My cosmology, my theory of the universe, and it's shared by a lot of people, is that there is only one being in the universe. You can call it God if you like. I don't care what you call it. Call it source. Call it the all that is. And it got bored with being not even all alone in the universe, but all alone before the universe. Just all alone, bored and lonely. And somebody else has suggested that being wouldn't even have been self-aware. It needed to differentiate into more than one part in order to be aware of the differences between the two parts, in order to become self-aware. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it certainly wouldn't be very conducive to growth, would it? Not having any playmates, not having anybody to share ideas with, not having anybody to test yourself against, even in a competitive way. So I believe that that being differentiated with a process that began with the Big Bang, differentiated into all of us. We like to say, some of us like to say, that we're fractals of God, or different faces of God, different aspects of God. But we are different individual aspects of God. We may all be one, but we're all individual aspects, faces, fractals of the one. And that's why globalist, one-size-fits-all globalist solutions don't work. Because, yeah, we're all one, but we're also all individuals. What may suit one group of individuals living in one place, call it a nation, call it a country, call it whatever you like to call it, doesn't necessarily wouldn't necessarily be the correct solution to people living in a different place faced with a similar situation. Look at the way that things have unfolded over the last 2 or 3 years. Governments all over the world in lockstep because some supranational government, supranational organization is telling the governments what to do. Some unelected supranational body is telling national governments what to do, and that's not right. Authoritarian systems will never work. That's why I opposed and continue to oppose the European Union. That's why I supported Brexit. Not because I hate foreigners, as some globalists tried to make out, but because I could see the EU as one step closer to a totalitarian world government. Well, I want to move society in the opposite direction. At the time, I did actually propose setting up a different organization to replace the EU. I called it the European Federation of Free and Independent Nations, with no political control, just free movement of goods and people, love and cooperation between different nations. Free movement of people, is that even possible? Is immigration, peaceful immigration, even possible? I did a video on this channel a couple of weeks ago asking that very same question, and feel free to give it a listen. I mean, I believe it is in the long term, but only provided that certain conditions are met. So let's look at this false idea that the globalists have been spreading. The idea is that borders cause wars. Typical fear-mongering concept, that, isn't it? Well, no, borders don't cause wars. Crossing borders with evil intent causes wars. If you want to relocate to another part of the world that you like better than the place that you're living now, that has a political system that you prefer to the one where you're living now, that has laws, customs, and traditions that you prefer to the ones where you're living now, then yeah, of course you should be free to move there. No question about it, you should be free to move there and settle there, raise your family there. But only if you're not going to try and change the place you're moving to in any way. Only if you're moving to that place because you prefer it just the way it is. If you move to a place where there were already people living, then make an effort to fit in. You know, when in Rome, adopt their customs, adopt their culture. Why else would you want to go? Remember that you've moved there because you prefer it there. You prefer it to the place you left. But if after you've been there for a while, you decide that you actually prefer the place you left, then go back there. Don't try to change your new home to look like the one that you left. Go back there. We hear a lot about multiculturalism these days. Now, I'm perfectly happy for my country, my place, or any other country, place, nation, whatever you want to call it, around the world, to be multi-ethnic. I don't care where you've come from. I never ask people, where have you come from? I ask people, where are they going? What's much more interesting to me is where they're going. I don't care whether you've got brown skin or red skin or yellow skin or olive skin. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is how you behave. So yeah, multi-ethnicism by all means, but multiculturalism, no way. If you want to move to another part of the world where there are already people living, then adopt their culture. Why else would you go? So, am I a nationalist or a globalist? I believe that nation states have a role to play for a little while longer, although I very much hope they won't be needed much longer. In the long term, I'd like to see all borders dismantled and all authoritarian governments dismantled and replaced by local democratic administrations that don't have any powers, that are only there to coordinate and make suggestions. But to achieve that, we'll have to adopt a new mindset, a mindset of love and generosity instead of meanness and fear. The old authoritarian money-based system is based on fear. Fear is used to control the people. Fear of going to hell. Fear of not getting your exams at school. Fear of not getting a good job. Fear of not having enough money. Fear that somebody's going to be getting one over on you. Fear that we're not going to get as much as we give. But what if we could flip that over and think more about how much we can give rather than how much we can get. What if we forgot about trying to keep up with the Joneses and actually help the Joneses to keep up with us? It's only this mindset of love and generosity that can enable us to give up governments and give up borders. It may take a while yet, but I truly do believe that that is our destiny as a species. That is the destiny of humankind. Love and generosity is the core of what some people are calling Christ consciousness, or the Aquarian age, or fifth dimensional consciousness, or whatever else you want to call it. And I really, really do believe that that is our destiny. So who's with me? Next week, Annie will be back, and I'm not quite sure what we're going to be talking about yet, but I'm sure it will be absolutely riveting. Please do like, share, and subscribe so that we can reach more people. Get our message of love and generosity out to more people. And that's what this channel is all about, is getting the message of love and generosity out to more people. This idea that by adopting a new mindset, we can change the world. And we can bring about the age of Aquarius, Christ consciousness, or fifth dimensional consciousness. And I shall put a link in the description to some of the other shows that I've been talking about that I've done. Namaste.